Welcome to Learning with Mr. Ruck. I'm Mr. Ruck Dashel, and today we are going to look at the consequences of the Civil War beginning. Immediately, what it meant for women and what was their role as far as, some of the ones who actually disguised themselves and snuck in to fight in the Civil War. Those that were left behind to basically take over the roles of the man and still fulfill the roles that they had as the woman left at home. In addition, the demographics and stats of those who fought in the Civil War, and we'll look at what children did in the war, because there are some instances where they fought at a super young age. Now, in addition, we'll look at the very beginning of the Civil War for a soldier and what that was like. Let me tell you, not super exciting stuff. Probably not what anyone bargained for. And finally, we'll look at a broadside that was fomenting the rage of the South, especially in Tennessee, to try to get people into the war to help fight. Let's history. Okay, as we've seen, there's been a clear choice that people had to make. Support secession and the dissolving of the Union, and therefore support slavery, or not. And that looked a lot of different ways as far as how you could actually fulfill that or act that out with your actions. So one way was join the fight. That was one of the options. There was actually women and children as young as 10, slaves and free blacks who fought in the war, in addition to the white adult men of the time. Therefore, almost anyone could have joined the Confederate Army. Now, in order for a woman to join, they would have had to have dressed up and tried to blend in, because it wasn't openly accepted that they could fight. Now, they could have joined the war effort by sort of becoming a nurse and following along with the regiments to, help people stay healthy. However, with lots of men leaving, you have to think about the fact that they're leaving sometimes in these cases plantations behind or farms behind, and therefore you have children at home. So a lot of the times the woman had to stay at home and assume the role of the man or the father and the mother in this case. So it's easy to think demographics wise also that either you were white, slave, free person, or you were a woman. But there also was another way that the statistics sort of divided, and that was that, about 25% of the white people who served in the Union Army were foreign born. So about 1 million, or 45% of all Union soldiers, were native-born Americans of British ancestry. In other words, they were born in the U.S., but came to the U.S. from Britain. About 516,000 Germans fought, and about 216,000 of those were born in Germany. So you're kind of getting this idea of how many people came from other countries and then fought in the Civil War. 210,000 were African Americans, half were freedmen who lived in the North, and half were ex-slaves who escaped slavery from the South, because these numbers so far are just about the Union. They actually, in some cases, had specifically colored regiments. In addition to that, there were about 200,000 Irishmen, 90,000 Dutch, 50,000 Canadian, 50,000 born in England. So not that they were born in America and originally came from England, but these were actually born in England and then had come over to the U.S. 40,000 French or French Canadian, and then 20,000 Scandinavian, 7,000 Italian, 7,000 Jewish, 6,000 Mexican, 5,000 Polish, 4,000 Native Americans. Yes, even Native Americans, after us totally taking their land and destroying many of the people, were fighting within the Civil War. Several hundred other varieties of nationalities involved as well. And many regiments were formed from just these immigrant soldiers, such as Irish brigades, the Swiss Rifles, etc., etc. For comparison, the Confederate Army was not very diverse. Only 91% of Confederate soldiers were native-born, and only 9% were foreign-born. So if you were in the South fighting, more than likely you were just a regular old U.S. native-born person that had come from Britain. Not Irish, not German, French, Mexican, etc. Now, if you joined the war, you may have thought to yourself, hey, this is going to be exciting, but here is one soldier's recall of what camp life was like in the very beginning. Soldiers' daily activities commenced with revel, which is a trumpet call, at 5 a.m., 6 a.m. in the winter. The monotony of a typical day in camp was described by one soldier as follows. The first thing in the morning is drill. Then drill. Then drill again. Then drill. Drill. And a little more drill. Then drill. And lastly, drill. I know. It's fascinating, huh? They were really into their drilling. So, this next thing that I'm going to read here is a very fascinating broadside about how Tennessee was trying to recruit people to the military, or in this case, to the Confederacy. Free men of Tennessee! The Yankee war is now being waged for beauty and booty. They have driven us from them and now say our trade they must and will have. To excite their hired and ruffian soldiers, they promise them our lands and tell them our women are beautiful. That beauty is the reward of the brave. Tennesseans, your country calls. Shall we wait until our homes are laid desolate, until sword and rape shall have visited them? Never. Then to arms, and let us meet the enemy on the borders, who so vile, so craven, as not to strike for his native land. The undersigned proposed to immediately raise an infantry company to be offered to the governor as part of the defense of the state and the Confederate States. All those who desire to join with us in serving our common country will report themselves immediately. So in other words, they were saying that like the Union or the Yankee Army or Yankee War that was being waged was to take the slaves away from them, and the people that were in fighting for the Union were being paid to do so. They were going to destroy their homes and land, and they were going to steal their women. Like, that's definitely not the case. Okay. Okay. So we know some of those options. Another option, so in addition, if you stayed home, the mayor of your town often was going to have to deal with the fact of either a Union army invading your town, say if you lived in the South and were part of the Confederacy, or vice versa. If you're in the North, the possibility that a Southern Confederate army would take over your town. And if you were in the South, there was some real fears about sort of, that uncertain future of large numbers of people leaving your town, especially men, to go fight in the war, or just families packing up and fleeing to the Union. There was also the possibility of your town, like I said, being controlled by an army, and the role that blacks now had, that their freedom was truly on the table because the war was being fought over this. So often a curfew was adopted, and no black people could be away from their homes, say, after like 7:30 at night. Wow. Yeah, I guess you could definitely say that life in the Civil War in the beginning was a little boring. Probably more boring than quarantine is right now. And that is saying a lot. The other thing that is pretty shocking is that broadside that we saw trying to help people join the militia and military in the Confederacy of Tennessee, specifically the state of Tennessee. And really how almost like outright lies were told about the Union trying to take their land, amongst other things. It's shocking. Although, I think that we could probably safely say that those kinds of outlandish statements have really probably been made throughout time in our history. It's just wild to see them happen back then, because we all think about the things we see on social media today and go, Wow, man, the world back then would have been a lot different with social media. Well, this was their social media. Broadsides. Things like that where it was changing how people thought and didn't have to be true. It could be totally made up. All right, this has been Mr. Ruck. Thank you for joining me today, and I will see you next time. Hopefully you got a little something out of this. Like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you next week in our next series of videos. Peace.